Hi class, welcome to Module 4, and I'm taking you directly to the PowerPoints, and we'll go through those fairly quickly because there's a number of videos that I want you to view for this module. We're looking at illness and death in less developed countries. I don't think it will be any surprise to you that illness looks different in more developed countries than less developed countries, that there are significant economic differences that come into place, as well as health variations, what you're exposed to, and the concerns for the major issues. So more developed nations tend to have higher incomes, they have work, they have more education. Less developed countries or the least developed nations refer to those that have suffered from diverse economic and the lowest gross national incomes, lowest life expectancies. So we can see significant variation from what we talked about in the last module. Chronic disease is a growing problem only as those countries live longer. So it becomes pretty significant, or as we control disease, I should say, as well. So life expectancy is significantly different. This is from the data from 2014. Remember that the life expectancy in the United States actually dropped in the last year. And we are one of the countries that have been affected by that. So the average life expectancy at birth is, in the United States, 79. Infant mortality rates we score very high at, as far as at 5.4%. So the lowest of the most developed countries. Then we have the less developed countries, Mexico, Philippines, India, and we can see a significant difference related to mortality, infant mortality, that's the death within the first year. And as we look at life expectancies, we can see them continue to grow. And then the least developed places oftentimes that we consider within Africa, Afghanistan, those areas, and we can see in Sierra Leone the lowest life expectancy at birth is at 45. Now remember, significant changes have come into place, and as we examine this, it's important to know that the World Health Organization, which is operated in conjunction with the UN, has been addressing many of these issues as we start looking forward. So the leading cause of death around the world, we can see, varies by whether we're in one country or another. So in lower income, still chronic heart disease, higher income, strokes, and so vascular disease, another is CVA, is a stroke. And other types of cerebral vascular diseases can be part of the process. We also see the difference here as far as what comes into place, and you can see that there is a difference based on our background and the higher rates of cancer that come into place. The exposure to chemicals are clearly here, and we don't see diseases that cause diarrhea and the loss of function as part of those more developed countries. We see diabetes across the board, so significant issues. So what's the source of disease in less developed nations? Well, each nation is different. We're highly exposed to some of these issues because of globalization, and understanding that globalization can be a positive for us as well as a negative as we look at the four. But the issues that primarily underlie diseases are, sorry about that, the powerlessness of the individuals, the unequal access to resources, that comes into play. Chronic malnutrition, not enough food, not the right types of food supporting leads to some serious problems. And we already know of vitamin deficiencies that come into place that affect formation and exposure within that. And it's a primary underlying cause of disease as we see children affected by that. International aid has worked with less developed countries, especially to address their health status and educate families, but we still go back to diets that may not be in the right order, or the lack of access of food, plus the warring conditions of a country may exacerbate the issues of poverty and malnutrition. Other things that are really important in this is just the education piece that comes into place and understanding the cause of disease. So not only the indirect result of malnutrition comes into place, but we have higher infectious diseases such as AIDS and HIV, tuberculosis, diarrheal diseases, and malaria. Are more likely to occur. Now think about that, how they're carried, how some of these diseases are in place. Or if we're in some place like Bangladesh, where more people live per area and we have poor nutrition, but we also have poor water conditions, and we have unsafe water that is contaminated, especially by feces coming into place. There is also significant difference in sexual behaviors and the patterns and the culture that comes in place. And we'll talk about this, you'll talk about this more as you view some information related to AIDS in Africa and why it is still at epidemic proportions in their country when it is so controlled in a first world country. There is a clear unequal economic structure that exists, that we have people with the most amount of money being very, very few, and the poverty rates are extremely high. And so we have some of this coming into place. And the role of women seems to be a major piece. As women have very low status, they seem to be the keeper of healthcare across countries. And without their status, they can't protect those roles as we go forward. So we see the intimate partner violence going on here for women at a much higher level in areas of high levels of poverty and third world countries, underdeveloped countries, as we might say. But part of that's tied to the culture, part of that is tied to the positioning that comes in place as we look at gender issues. So, important things to consider as you're reading through this chapter and you look at the diseases, the infant mortality rate, all of those that come into play. So what are you doing for this week? Let me pop back over to the issues you will cover this week. So think about this from your sociological imagination. Keep your eye on culture. The first video I'm asking you to look at is a very short clip about a day on the front line of Doctors Without Borders. Then I would like you to explore what Doctors Without Borders do, a significant service as far as to the less developed nations and how they impact that. The second thing I'm asking you to explore is the World Health Organization. And you will just see what they service and how they come into place. As you go out with that, as you hit the control button to get there, you'll see that there's significant information on who they service, the background, the needs of food insecurity, the effect of cholera, and so unsafe drinking water and how it moves, the hot spots, the South Sudan area right now, Yemen, all of those areas become pretty powerful as you're exploring this. So I want you to explore that website and look at it at a deeper level. Then I'm giving you 3 quick videos. Just a historical one related to HIV and AIDS in Africa. This one is from 2000, I believe, 5. And then the update from 2015, the economic impact of AIDS in Africa, part 1 and 2, and what has changed over that time. When you've completed those and explored those, I think you're going to find that tied to your reading in the chapter, you're going to find it very interesting how different the world is health-wise outside of those first world countries, those more developed countries. And remember that the United States falls lower in many respects for our health care than some of those like Denmark, Japan, even England, as we look at what goes on. As far as your discussion board, remember your first answer to your discussion board questions needs to be posted by Wednesday. For this week, your module assessment is an essay, and you should support your answers by citing your sources, whether they be the videos from class or the textbook. And properly submit those. Remember that you need to complete at least 10 assessments throughout the semester for your course points. But I'll look forward to having your first major written assignment within the possibilities of your weekly responses. With that said, keeping that in mind for the week, and the computer's working a little slow, don't forget that your interview is due on February 9th, and that is your interview with that healthcare professional. Remember, you had guidelines as well under content of how to do an interview, and so and what to look for as you're completing that information. Anyway, hope you have a great week, and I'm looking forward to your discussions.